The research ship Aurora moved slowly through space near a distant star. Its metal hull gleamed under the light of the alien sun as it drifted between two worlds that humans had never seen before. Inside the ship, two very different groups worked together on what they called a peaceful mission. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge watching the stars. He was a tall man with gray hair and steady eyes. The uniform he wore showed his high rank in the Terran Defense Force. Next to him stood Lieutenant Commander Lisa Rodriguez, a sharp woman who served as his second-in-command. She checked the ship's systems on her tablet while keeping one eye on their alien partners. The aliens called themselves the Zelkari. They looked like tall, thin humans but with blue-gray skin and large black eyes. Their leader was High Hierarchist Veltar, who wore a complex uniform covered in symbols that showed his exact position in their society. Every symbol had meaning. Every mark told others exactly where he stood compared to everyone else. Veltar had spent many months studying human military ranks before this mission. He had read thick books about human protocol. He had memorized charts showing who gave orders to whom. He thought he understood humans completely, but watching them work together each day confused him more and more. The human crew included many different people with different jobs. Sergeant Pete Collins handled security. He was a strong man who kept the ship safe from dangers. Captain Amy Hughes piloted the ship through space with skill that impressed even the Zelkari. Lieutenant Ben Parker managed all communications between the ship and Earth. Each person had their role and their rank, but there was one human who puzzled Veltar most of all. Chief Petty Officer Danny Sullivan worked as the ship's doctor and medic. Everyone called him Doc. His rank was not very high compared to the others. According to the charts Veltar had studied, Doc should take orders from many people on the ship, yet something seemed different about how others treated him. Veltar watched Doc move through the ship during his daily rounds. The human doctor checked on crew members and made sure everyone stayed healthy. But people did more than just let him examine them. They asked his opinion about things that had nothing to do with medicine. They listened when he spoke. They seemed to respect him in a way that the rank charts did not explain. Sub-hierarchist Kexnan served as Veltar's assistant and shared his confusion about human behavior. Kexnan was younger and had even less experience with humans. He followed Veltar everywhere and took notes about everything he saw. "I do not understand their system," Kexnan said to Veltar one day as they watched the humans work. "The one called Doc has a lower rank than many others, yet they seek his advice about ship operations and crew problems." Veltar nodded slowly. In Zelkari society, rank meant everything. Higher ranks gave orders. Lower ranks followed them. There was no confusion about who had power over whom. The system worked perfectly because everyone knew their exact place. "Perhaps they do not follow their own rules," Veltar suggested. "Humans may be less organized than we believed." But that explanation did not feel right either. The humans ran their ship very well. They completed their work with great skill. Their technology impressed the Zelkari scientists. These did not seem like the actions of a disorganized species. The Aurora's mission was simple in theory. Humans and Zelkari would work together to explore new star systems. They would study planets that might support life. They would learn about each other's cultures. It was meant to build friendship between their two species. For 3 months, the mission had gone smoothly. The two groups shared meals in the ship's dining area. Human and Zelkari scientists worked side by side in the laboratories. Everyone seemed to get along well despite their differences. But Veltar still struggled to understand human social behavior. He watched Commander Morrison give orders to his crew. The humans followed these orders promptly and efficiently. This part made sense to Veltar. Morrison had the highest rank, so others obeyed him. Yet sometimes Morrison asked for advice from crew members with lower ranks. Sometimes he changed his orders based on what they told him. This confused Veltar greatly. In Zelkari society, asking a lower rank for advice showed weakness. Changing orders showed poor planning. Doc seemed to be at the center of many of these strange interactions. Morrison often asked Doc questions about the crew's health and morale. Rodriguez consulted with Doc about scheduling and duty assignments. Even Sergeant Collins, who handled security, sometimes asked Doc about personnel issues. The human called Doc has influence beyond his rank, Kexanan observed during one of their private conversations. But I cannot find the source of this influence in any of their official documents. Veltar had reached the same conclusion. He had read Doc's personnel file carefully. The human had served on many ships over 15 years. He had received several medals for good service. His record showed that he was skilled at his job and well liked by his crews. But nothing explained why others treated him almost like a leader. Confusion grew worse when Veltar watched the humans during their off-duty time. In the ship's recreation area, crew members naturally gathered around Doc. They told him about their problems and concerns. They asked his opinion about personal matters. They seemed to trust him completely. Doc never acted like he was in charge. He never gave direct orders to anyone except his medical assistants. He spoke softly and listened more than he talked. Yet people sought him out constantly. They followed his suggestions as if they were commands from Morrison himself. One evening, Veltar decided to approach Doc directly. The human doctor was alone in the medical bay, organizing supplies and updating patient records. Veltar entered quietly and waited to be acknowledged. "Good evening, High Hierarchist," Doc said without looking up from his work. "Is there something I can help you with?" "I wish to understand human rank structure better," Veltar said carefully. "Your position is not high in the official hierarchy, yet others seek your guidance frequently." Doc looked up with a slight smile. "I suppose that's true. People come to me with their problems sometimes. But why do they come to you instead of their direct superiors?" Doc set down his tablet and considered the question. "Well, I've been doing this job for a long time. I've seen a lot of different situations. Sometimes experience matters more than rank when people need help." This answer only confused Veltar more. But surely following proper chain of command is more important than personal experience? "Not always," Doc replied. "The chain of command is important for giving orders and making official decisions. But people are complicated. Sometimes they need someone to talk to who understands their situation. Sometimes they need advice from someone who's been through similar problems." Veltar tried to process this information. In Zelkari society, seeking advice from someone with lower rank was almost unthinkable. It suggested that the higher-ranked individual was incompetent or weak. "Do your superiors object to this informal consultation?" Veltar asked. Doc laughed quietly. "Not at all. Commander Morrison and Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez are both excellent officers. They know that keeping the crew happy and healthy helps everyone do their jobs better. They don't see it as a threat to their authority." "But how can they maintain discipline if rank boundaries are not strictly observed?" "Rank is still important," Doc explained. "When Morrison gives an order, everyone follows it. When Rodriguez assigns duties, people do what she says. But leadership isn't just about giving orders. It's also about taking care of your people and helping them succeed." Veltar left the medical bay more confused than ever. The human system seemed to work despite its apparent contradictions, but he could not understand how maintaining both rigid hierarchy and flexible consultation was possible. As the Aurora continued its journey through space, Veltar knew that his understanding of humans was far from complete. Something important was missing from his analysis, but he could not identify what it was. The morning started like any other aboard the Aurora. The ship's crew went about their normal duties while scanning a large piece of space debris that floated near an old mining station. The sensors showed it was made of metal and very old, but appeared to be just harmless junk left behind by some ancient civilization. Commander Morrison stood on the bridge reviewing the scan results with Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez. The readings showed no power signatures and no signs of life. Everything suggested the debris was completely dead and safe to investigate. "Looks like a derelict station," Morrison said, studying the data on his screen. "Probably abandoned for centuries. Take us in closer for a detailed scan." Captain Hughes piloted the Aurora toward the massive structure. As they got closer, everyone could see through the windows that it was indeed an old space station. Its surface was covered with strange markings and symbols that no one recognized. Some sections looked damaged, as if something had attacked it long ago. The Zelkari were very interested in the discovery. Veltar and his team had never seen this type of architecture before. They began taking detailed pictures and measurements, while the human crew prepared scanning equipment. No life signs detected, Lieutenant Parker reported from his communications station. No power readings either. Whatever this thing is, it's been dead for a very long time. Doc was in the medical bay preparing for what he expected to be a routine day. Some crew members needed their regular health checkups, and he wanted to finish his reports about the crew's overall condition. He had no idea that everything was about to change. The Aurora moved to within 50 meters of the ancient station. The scanning teams were getting ready to send over a small exploration party when something unexpected happened. Warning lights suddenly began flashing on the bridge. "Commander," Hughes called out with worry in her voice. "I'm reading some kind of energy buildup coming from that station." Morrison moved quickly to look at her displays. The readings showed power levels rising rapidly inside the supposedly dead structure. Before anyone could react, bright lights began appearing along the station's surface. "It's not dead after all," Rodriguez said, her voice tight with concern. "Those look like weapon systems powering up." "Get us out of here," Morrison ordered. Full reverse. But it was too late. The ancient station's defense systems had been sleeping for centuries, waiting for someone to come close enough to trigger them. Arrays of energy weapons that had been built by a long-dead race suddenly came to life and began firing at the Aurora. The first blast hit the ship's main power grid. Lights flickered throughout the Aurora as electricity surged through systems that were not designed to handle such an overload. The second blast struck their engine section, causing explosions that shook the entire ship. "Hull breach in Section 7, someone shouted over the alarm sounds. "Emergency bulkheads are sealing." "We've lost main power," Hughes reported as she struggled to control the ship using backup systems. "I can barely keep us stable." More energy blasts struck the Aurora. Each hit caused more damage and more systems to fail. The ship's artificial gravity fluctuated, making people stumble and grab onto anything they could find for support. Commander Morrison was on his way to the damage control station when a piece of ceiling broke loose and struck him in the head. He collapsed to the floor, blood flowing from a deep cut on his forehead. Several crew members rushed to help him, but he was unconscious and badly hurt. "Medical emergency on the bridge," Rodriguez called over the ship's communication system. "Doc, get up here now." Throughout the ship, people were getting hurt as more systems failed. The artificial gravity kept changing, throwing people against walls and equipment. Sparks flew from damaged electrical panels. Emergency lights cast strange shadows as the normal lighting system failed. Doc grabbed his medical kit and ran toward the bridge as fast as he could. The corridors were filled with smoke and the sound of alarms. He passed crew members who were trying to fix damaged systems while dealing with their own injuries. When Doc reached the bridge, he found Commander Morrison on the floor surrounded by worried crew members. Rodriguez was trying to coordinate damage control while also attempting to take command of the crisis situation. "How bad is he hurt?" Rodriguez asked, as Doc knelt beside Morrison. Doc quickly examined the commander's injuries. The head wound was serious, and Morrison showed signs of a severe concussion. "He needs immediate treatment," Doc said, "and he won't be giving any orders for a while." Rodriguez felt the weight of command fall on her shoulders. She was the second-ranking officer, which meant she was now in charge of getting everyone through this crisis. But the situation was overwhelming. Systems were failing faster than they could be repaired. People were getting hurt. The ship was barely holding together. "What do we do?" Rodriguez asked, looking around at the damaged bridge. She had been trained for command situations, but nothing had prepared her for this level of chaos. The ancient station continued to fire at them. Each new blast caused more damage to the Aurora's already weakened hull. Warning lights flashed everywhere, and the sound of alarms filled the air. Doc started treating Morrison's injuries while listening to the reports coming in from around the ship. Section 7 had a hull breach but was sealed off. The engine room was badly damaged. Life support systems were running on backup power. Several crew members were trapped in a section where the doors had been damaged by the explosions. "We need to shut down those weapons," Rodriguez said, trying to think through all the problems at once. "And we need to get our people out of the damaged sections. and we need to fix the life support before we run out of air. The Zelkari crew was also affected by the crisis. Veltar and his team had been thrown around by the gravity fluctuations and were trying to help where they could. But they were not familiar with human ship systems and could only do basic tasks. As Doc worked on Morrison, he listened to Rodriguez struggle with the many problems facing the ship. She was a good officer, but she was trying to handle too many things at once. Her training had taught her to follow procedures and make careful decisions. But this crisis required quick action and creative solutions. "Lisa," Doc said quietly as he bandaged Morrison's head wound, "you need to prioritize. What's the most important thing right now?" Rodriguez looked at him with grateful eyes. "Keeping people alive," she said immediately. "Right, so let's focus on that first. Everything else can wait." Doc helped move Morrison to a safer part of the bridge, then stood up and looked around at the chaos. His medical training had taught him to stay calm during emergencies. His years of experience had shown him how to make quick decisions when lives were at stake. "Hughes," Doc called to the pilot, "can you get us further away from that station?" "I'm trying," Hughes replied through gritted teeth. "But the engines are barely working. I can give you maybe another 100 meters of distance, but that's all." "Do it," Doc said. Then he turned to Rodriguez. "We need to send someone over to that station to shut down those weapons manually. They're going to keep firing until we're dead or gone." Rodriguez nodded. "I'll organize a team." "No," Doc said gently. "You need to stay here and coordinate everything. Send Collins and a small team. He knows how to handle dangerous situations." Without really thinking about it, Rodriguez found herself following Doc's suggestions. Something about his calm confidence made her trust his judgment even though she outranked him. Doc moved through the ship checking on injured crew members and coordinating repair efforts. He sent people to different tasks based on their skills rather than their ranks. He made quick decisions about priorities while keeping everyone focused on the most important goals. Veltar watched all of this with growing amazement. The human chain of command seemed to be breaking down, but instead of chaos, he saw organized activity. People were following Doc's suggestions, even though he had no official authority to give orders. The crisis was far from over, but already Doc was taking charge in ways that confused and fascinated the alien observer. The Aurora shook again as another energy blast struck its damaged hull. Emergency lights cast red shadows throughout the ship, while alarms continued to sound from every direction. The situation was getting worse by the minute, and everyone knew they were running out of time. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez stood on the bridge trying to manage multiple crises at once. Her hand shook slightly as she looked at damage reports streaming in from all over the ship. The numbers were overwhelming. Too many systems were failing. Too many people needed help. Too many decisions had to be made right now. Doc finished, securing Commander Morrison on a medical stretcher, and looked around the bridge. He could see that Rodriguez was struggling with the complexity of the situation. She was a good officer, but she had never faced anything like this before. The weight of command was crushing her ability to think clearly. "Lisa," Doc said quietly, walking over to where she stood staring at the damage reports. "What do you need me to do?" Rodriguez looked at him with relief in her eyes. "I don't know where to start, Doc. Everything is falling apart at once." Doc nodded and looked at the reports on her screen. His years of experience in crisis situations had taught him how to break down complex problems into manageable pieces. "Okay, let's think about this step by step. What's going to kill us first?" "The life support system," Rodriguez answered immediately. "We're running on backup power and it won't last more than 6 hours." "Good. That's our timeline. What's the second biggest problem?" "The people trapped in Section 12. The blast doors are jammed and we can't get to them." Doc thought for a moment. "Collins," he called to the security sergeant who was helping coordinate damage control. "I need you to take a team to Section 12 and get those people out. Use whatever tools you need. Cut through the doors if you have to." Sergeant Collins looked at Rodriguez for confirmation of the order, but she was already nodding. "Do what Doc says," she told him. Collins gathered his team and headed for the damaged section. Doc turned his attention to the next problem. The ancient station was still firing at them, and every blast caused more damage to their already weakened ship. Hughes, Doc called to the pilot. Can you put us in the shadow of that big piece of debris? It might give us some cover from those weapons. Captain Hughes looked at her navigation display. I can try, but the engines are barely responding. It'll be a rough ride. Do it, Doc said. We need to buy ourselves some time. Hughes began the difficult maneuver of moving the damaged ship behind the debris field. The Aurora groaned and shuddered as its weakened engines struggled to provide thrust. More sparks flew from damaged control panels as the ship's systems were pushed beyond their limits. Beltar watched all of this from his position near the back of the bridge. The high hierarchist was fascinated by what he was seeing. According to everything he had studied about human military structure, Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez should be giving all the orders. She was the ranking officer with Commander Morrison unconscious. Instead, Chief Petty Officer Sullivan was making suggestions that everyone followed without question. More confusing still, Rodriguez seemed grateful for his guidance rather than threatened by it. In Zelkari society, such behavior would be seen as a challenge to authority and dealt with harshly. Sub-hierarchist, Veltar whispered to Kexnan, who was standing beside him. Are you observing this unusual command structure? Kexnan nodded, his large black eyes wide with confusion. The lower-ranked human is giving directions to higher-ranked ones. Yet there is no conflict or resistance. I do not understand how this is possible. As the Aurora moved behind the debris, the weapons, fire from the ancient station stopped temporarily. The ship was still in danger, but at least they had a few minutes to work without being shot at continuously. Doc used this breathing space to organize repair efforts throughout the ship. He sent Lieutenant Parker to coordinate with the Zelkari technical staff, knowing that Parker's diplomatic skills would help the two groups work together effectively. Ben, Doc said to the communications officer, I need you to work with the Zelkari engineers. They understand energy systems differently than we do. Maybe they can help us figure out how to boost our power output. Parker nodded and immediately went to find Veltar's technical team. Doc's suggestion made perfect sense. The Zelkari had different technology and might see solutions that humans would miss. Next, Doc turned his attention to the biggest problem of all. The ancient station's weapons would start firing again as soon as the Aurora moved out from behind the debris. Someone had to go over to that station and shut down its defense systems manually. We need a team to board that station, Doc said to Rodriguez. It's the only way to stop those weapons permanently. Rodriguez agreed, but she looked worried. It's going to be extremely dangerous. Those weapons are automated, but there might be other defenses we don't know about. Doc nodded. Collins is the best choice to lead the boarding party. He has the most experience with dangerous situations. But he'll need technical support to figure out how to shut down those weapons. Who should go with him? Rodriguez asked. Doc thought for a moment. Take Martinez from engineering. She understands power systems better than anyone. And take one of the Zelkari technicians. Their energy expertise might be crucial. Rodriguez started to give the orders, then stopped. Doc, you're making all these decisions. Shouldn't I be the one figuring out the mission assignments? Doc looked at her with understanding in his eyes. You are in command, Lisa. I'm just offering suggestions based on what I've seen over the years. The final decisions are always yours. This response seemed to reassure Rodriguez. She gave the official orders for the boarding party while Doc continued to coordinate other aspects of the crisis response. Somehow, having Doc's experience to draw on made her feel more confident about her command decisions. The boarding party prepared their equipment while Hughes maneuvered the Aurora to a position where they could launch a small shuttle toward the ancient station. The plan was risky, but it was their only hope of stopping the weapons that would eventually destroy their ship. Meanwhile, Doc moved through the ship checking on repair progress and injured crew members. He found problems that others had missed and suggested solutions that saved time and resources. His calm presence seemed to steady everyone around him. In the medical bay, Doc treated several crew members who had been hurt during the initial attack. While working on their injuries, he also coordinated with different repair teams through his communication device. He was managing multiple tasks at once, but somehow he made it look easy. Veltar followed Doc during his rounds, trying to understand how the human was able to maintain such influence without formal authority. He watched Doc talk to crew members, listen to their concerns, and offer both medical care and practical advice about their work. How do you maintain discipline without rank authority? Veltar finally asked Doc directly. Doc looked up from bandaging a crew member's injured arm. I don't maintain discipline, that's not my job. I just try to help people do their jobs better. But they follow your suggestions as if they were orders from a superior officer. Doc finished with the bandage and turned to face the alien commander. People follow suggestions when they trust that the person making them has their best interests in mind. Trust isn't something you get from rank insignia, you have to earn it. How does one earn such trust? By being reliable, Doc said simply. By helping when help is needed. By admitting when you don't know something. By putting the team's needs ahead of your own ego. The boarding party launched their shuttle toward the ancient station while Doc continued his work throughout the ship. The crisis was far from over, but somehow the Aurora's crew was functioning as a coordinated team, despite their damaged ship and confused command structure. Veltar realized that he was witnessing something his people had never developed. Leadership that came from below rather than from above. It was a concept that challenged everything he thought he knew about how organizations should work. The small shuttle carrying Sergeant Collins and his team disappeared into the shadow of the ancient station. On the Aurora's bridge, everyone watched their progress on the main screen while trying to keep the damaged ship running. The boarding party had maybe 2 hours before the ship's backup power failed completely. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez stood next to the communication station, listening to reports from Collins's team as they moved through the alien structure. The old station was full of strange corridors and rooms that no human had ever seen before. Every step was dangerous because they had no idea what other defenses might still be working. Doc moved between the bridge and other parts of the ship, checking on repair progress and coordinating different work teams. His calm voice could be heard over the communication system as he directed people to where they were needed most. Despite having no official authority over most of these operations, everyone seemed to naturally follow his guidance. Veltar approached Rodriguez during a quiet moment when she was reviewing damage reports. The alien commander had been thinking about the strange human command structure he was witnessing, and he needed to understand it better. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, Veltar said politely. May I ask you a question about your command procedures? Rodriguez looked up from her tablet. Of course, High Hierarchist, what would you like to know? I observe that Chief Petty Officer Sullivan makes many decisions that others follow, even though his rank is lower than many crew members. In Zelkari society, this would create chaos. How do you maintain order? Rodriguez smiled slightly despite the stress of the situation. Doc isn't really making decisions for other people. He's sharing his experience and knowledge. When someone has been in space as long as Doc has, you learn to listen to their advice. How long has he served? Veltar asked. 15 years, Rodriguez replied. He's been on 12 different ships. He's seen almost every kind of crisis you can imagine. When Doc suggests something, it's usually because he's dealt with a similar situation before. Veltar processed this information. Experience was valued in Zelkari society too, but it was always combined with appropriate rank. Has he never been promoted to a higher position? Oh, he's been offered promotions many times, Rodriguez said. Commander Morrison has recommended him for officer training at least twice, but Doc always turns down the promotions. He says he prefers to stay close to the crew level where he can help people directly. This concept was almost impossible for Veltar to understand. In his society, everyone wanted higher rank because it meant more power and better status. The idea of deliberately refusing promotion was completely foreign to him. Their conversation was interrupted by Colin's voice over the communication system. Aurora, we've reached what looks like the station's main control center, but we have a problem. What kind of problem? Rodriguez asked quickly. The control systems are more complex than we expected. Martinez thinks she can shut down the weapons, but it's going to take time to figure out the alien technology. Maybe 3 or 4 hours. Rodriguez felt her heart sink. Collins, we don't have that much time. Our backup power won't last more than 2 hours. Doc appeared on the bridge just as Collins delivered the bad news. He had been down in engineering helping with power distribution, but he came up as soon as he heard about the delay. What are our options? Doc asked Rodriguez. Not many, she replied. Collins needs more time than we have power. If we can't boost our energy output somehow, we'll lose life support before they can shut down those weapons. Doc thought for a moment, then activated the communication system. Collins, describe what Martinez is seeing over there. Collins' voice came back with sounds of strange alien machinery in the background. The control panels are covered with symbols we don't recognize. Martinez says the power flow patterns are similar to our systems, but the interface is completely different. She's trying to trace the weapon circuits, but every time she thinks she's found something, it leads to another system she doesn't understand. Doc nodded as he listened. What about our Zelkari team member? Are their energy systems similar to what you're seeing? There was a pause. Then Collins replied. Tech specialist Mordan says some of the energy patterns look familiar, but the control methods are different from both human and Zelkari technology. This is something much older. Doc looked at the power consumption reports on Rodriguez's tablet. The numbers were not good. Even with all non-essential systems shut down, they were still using power faster than their damaged generators could produce it. We need to reduce our power consumption even more, Doc said. And we need to figure out how to help that boarding party work faster. Rodriguez felt overwhelmed again. How can we reduce power any further? We've already shut down everything except life support and basic systems. What if we shut down artificial gravity in non-essential areas? Doc suggested. That would save significant power, and people can work in zero gravity for a few hours if they have to. Captain Hughes looked up from her pilot station. That's pretty drastic, Doc. A lot of people aren't comfortable working in zero gravity. Doc nodded. It's not ideal, but it might buy us the time we need. What do you think, Lisa? Rodriguez realized that Doc was asking her to make the official decision, even though the suggestion came from him. Do it, she said. Shut down gravity. In all areas except the bridge, medical bay, and engineering. As the artificial gravity shut down in most of the ship, people began floating and had to grab onto handholds to move around. Some crew members struggled with the change, but others adapted quickly and continued their repair work. Meanwhile, Doc was thinking about the problem on the ancient station. The boarding party needed help understanding the alien technology, but they were too far away for detailed technical support from the Aurora. Ben, Doc called to Lieutenant Parker, can we establish a better communication link with the boarding party? Maybe send them detailed scans of similar energy systems from our database? Parker worked at his station for several minutes. I can boost the signal strength, but our communication array was damaged in the attack. The best I can do is voice communication and maybe some simple data transfers. Doc had an idea. What if we send someone else over to help them? Someone with different technical expertise? Rodriguez looked worried. That would mean splitting our team and risking more people. It would, Doc agreed. But if we don't help them succeed, we're all going to die anyway when the power runs out. The decision was difficult, but Rodriguez knew Doc was right. Who would you send? Doc thought about the crew members available and their different skills. Dr. Foster from the science team. She specializes in xenoarchaeology and alien technology. And maybe one more Zelkari technician. Between Martinez, Foster, and 2 Zelkari experts, they might be able to figure out those alien controls. Rodriguez gave the orders to prepare a second shuttle. Dr. Foster quickly gathered her equipment while another Zelkari team member prepared to join the mission. Everyone knew they were racing against time. As the second shuttle launched toward the ancient station, Doc continued coordinating repair efforts throughout the Aurora. He moved through the ship in the reduced gravity, checking on different work teams and making sure everyone had what they needed to do their jobs. Veltar followed Doc during his rounds, still trying to understand the human leadership system he was witnessing. In one section, he watched Doc resolve a dispute between 2 repair teams who both needed the same piece of equipment. Instead of making an arbitrary decision, Doc listened to both teams and found a creative solution that helped them both complete their work. In another area, Doc found a crew member who was having trouble working in zero gravity. Instead of ordering someone else to help, Doc took a few minutes to show the person some techniques for moving and working without gravity. His patience and kindness impressed Veltar greatly. "Your leadership style is very different from what I expected," Veltar told Doc as they moved through the ship. "I'm not really leading anything," Doc replied. "I'm just trying to help people solve problems. But people follow your suggestions and seek your advice constantly. That is a form of leadership." Doc paused at a junction in the corridor, floating in the zero-gravity environment. "Maybe it is. But it's not the kind of leadership that comes from rank or authority. It comes from trust and shared experience." Veltar was beginning to understand that human leadership was far more complex than he had realized. The second shuttle reached the ancient station just as the Aurora's power levels dropped to critical levels. On the bridge, warning lights flashed red as systems began shutting down automatically to preserve what little energy remained. Everyone knew they had maybe 30 minutes before life support failed completely. Doc floated in the zero-gravity environment near the engineering station, coordinating between multiple repair teams while listening to reports from both boarding parties. On the alien station, his calm voice could be heard throughout the ship as he directed people and resources where they were needed most. "Foster, what's your assessment of the alien control systems?" Doc asked over the communication link. Dr. Foster's voice came back, with excitement and worry mixed together. "Doc, this technology is incredible but incredibly complex. The alien builders designed multiple backup systems and failsafes. Martinez found the main weapon controls, but shutting them down safely requires deactivating 17 different subsystems in the correct sequence." "How long will that take?" Rodriguez asked from her position at the command station. "At least an hour," Foster replied. "Maybe longer. If we do it wrong, we might trigger other defense systems that could be even worse than the weapons." Doc looked at the power consumption readings on his tablet. The numbers were stark and frightening. Even with artificial gravity shut down and all non-essential systems offline, they had 25 minutes of power left at most. "Collins," Doc called to the boarding party leader. "What if you don't shut down the weapons safely? What if you just destroy the control systems?" There was a pause before Collins responded. "Martinez says that could work, but it's risky. If we damage the wrong components, we might cause a power feedback that could destroy this whole station, and us with it." "But it would be faster?" Doc asked. "Much faster. Maybe 10 minutes instead of an hour." Doc thought quickly about their options. They could try the safe approach and run out of power before the weapons were disabled, or they could try the dangerous approach and risk losing the boarding parties if something went wrong. Rodriguez floated next to Doc, waiting for his assessment. She had come to rely on his judgment during this crisis, and she knew he would give her the best advice possible. "What do you think we should do?" Rodriguez asked Doc quietly. Doc looked at the power readings again, then at the faces of the crew members around him. These people were depending on him to help find a solution that would save their lives. The weight of that responsibility was enormous, but he had carried similar burdens many times before. "Collins," Doc said over the communication system, "I want you and your teams to try the safe shutdown procedure, but I want you to set charges as a backup plan. If you can't complete the safe shutdown in 15 minutes, blow the control systems and get back to your shuttles as fast as you can." "Understood," Collins replied, setting up the backup plan now. While the boarding parties worked on the ancient station, Doc turned his attention to the Aurora's power crisis. He knew there had to be some way to squeeze a few more minutes of life support from their damaged systems. "Hughes," Doc called to the pilot. "What if we shut down all propulsion systems completely? How much power would that save us?" Captain Hughes checked her displays. "Maybe 5 more minutes of life support. But if we shut down propulsion, we won't be able to move away from that station if the boarding party has to blow it up." "And if the station explodes while we're this close?" Doc asked. "We'd probably be destroyed by the blast," Hughes admitted. Doc weighed the options carefully. 5 more minutes might be enough for the boarding party to complete their mission safely. But if they had to use the dangerous backup plan, the Aurora would be too close to survive the explosion. It was the kind of decision that normally required command authority. But Rodriguez was looking at him with complete trust, waiting for his recommendation. Rodriguez, Doc said formally, I recommend we maintain minimum propulsion power. If the boarding party has to use explosives, we'll need to be able to move away quickly. Rodriguez nodded. Do it. Maintain minimum propulsion only. As the minutes ticked by, reports came in from the boarding parties. They were making progress on the safe shutdown procedure, but it was slow work. The alien technology was unlike anything they had ever seen, and every step required careful analysis to avoid triggering other defense systems. 12 minutes remaining, Foster reported. We've successfully deactivated 9 of the 17 subsystems, but the remaining ones are more complex. Doc looked at the Aurora's power levels. They had 8 minutes of life support left. The boarding party was running out of time. Martinez, Doc called to the engineer on the station. In your professional opinion, what are the chances of completing the safe shutdown in time? There was a long pause before Martinez answered. Honestly, Doc, maybe 30%. These last few systems are really complicated. Doc made the hardest decision of the entire crisis. Collins, switch to the backup plan. Set your charges and prepare. To evacuate. Are you sure? Collins asked. If this goes wrong, we might not make it back to the shuttles in time. Doc looked around the bridge at the crew members who were depending on his judgment. Rodriguez nodded at him, showing that she supported his decision even though it put the boarding parties at great risk. I'm sure, Doc said. Do it now. The IQ. Next few minutes were the longest of everyone's lives. The boarding parties placed their explosive charges on the alien control systems and began running back toward their shuttles. Meanwhile, the Aurora's crew prepared for emergency acceleration in case they needed to escape quickly. Charges are set, Collins reported as his teams reached their shuttles. Detonating in 30 seconds. Doc activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands prepare for possible emergency acceleration. Hold on to something secure. The explosion on the ancient station was visible through the Aurora's windows as a bright flash of light. The alien weapons immediately stopped firing, but the blast also caused structural damage to the station. Large pieces of debris began breaking away and drifting in all directions. Get us out of here, Rodriguez ordered Hughes. The pilot fired. The Aurora's damaged engines at maximum power, pushing the ship away from the disintegrating station. The acceleration was rough and painful in the zero-gravity environment, but everyone held on as the ship struggled to reach a safe distance. Both shuttles with the boarding parties made it back to the Aurora, just as the ship's backup power finally failed. Emergency lighting came on throughout the ship, powered by small batteries that would last only a few more hours. But they were alive. The immediate crisis was over. Commander Morrison regained consciousness in the medical bay 3 hours later. Doc was treating other injured crew members when Morrison sat up on his medical bed and looked around in confusion. What happened? Morrison asked. The last thing I remember was the bridge getting hit. Doc quickly explained the crisis and how they had survived. Morrison listened with growing amazement as Doc described the boarding parties, the power shortage, and the desperate decision to destroy the alien weapon systems. Rodriguez handled the command situation well, Doc concluded. She made all the right decisions under extreme pressure. Morrison looked at Doc with understanding in his eyes. I'm sure she did, but I'm also sure she had good advice from someone with experience. Later, as the Aurora limped toward the nearest space station for repairs, Veltar approached Doc in the medical bay. The alien commander had been thinking about everything he had witnessed during the crisis. Chief Petty Officer Sullivan, Veltar, said formally, I wish to understand something about human leadership. Doc looked up from organizing his medical supplies. Sure, what would you like to know? During the crisis, you made many important decisions. Others followed your guidance even though you held no command authority. How is this possible? Doc considered the question carefully. Leadership isn't really about rank or authority. It's about taking responsibility when someone needs to, and others recognizing that you're the right person for the situation. But how do others know you are the right person? Experience, I guess. Trust. When people have seen you handle difficult situations before, they're more likely to listen to your suggestions when a new crisis happens. Veltar nodded slowly. In Zelkari society, leadership comes from position in the hierarchy, but human leadership seems to come from something else. Respect, Doc said simply. You can't order someone to respect you. You have to earn it by helping them and proving that you care about their welfare more than your own status. Veltar spent the next several days writing a detailed report for the Zelkari High Command. He explained that human command structures were far more sophisticated than his people had understood. He recommended a complete study of human military psychology and leadership principles. But he also realized that the flexible leadership he had witnessed might be uniquely human. The Zelkari had evolved as a highly hierarchical species where everyone knew their exact place in society. Humans seemed to have evolved as cooperative hunters where leadership shifted based on circumstances and expertise. On the final day before they reached the repair station, Veltar found Doc in the medical bay conducting routine health checkups.